Welcome, everyone. It looks like we have the committee. I am Commissioner Megan Faulkner. I'm the chair of the Planning, Zoning, and Transportation Committee meeting. Welcome, everyone. To get started, Gordon, could you promote Mignon Bowie? She is going to give us an update about, Mignon is our Ward 1 liaison for Ddot, and she's going to give us an update about the traffic safety investigation process.
Yep, she just came up.
Great, thanks.
Hi, everyone. Hold on one moment. I'm sorry. Hi, everybody. Nice to see everyone today. I promise I will be quick. Well, I'll try to be quick. I just wanted to go over Ddot's new process for not only TSIs, but the new ANC resolution process. So am I able to share my screen?
Yes.
Okay. And please forgive me, I never use Zoom. So how do I share my screen? I apologize.
There's a button on the bottom row that's a green box with an arrow that says share screen.
That says share my screen. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, one moment. Okay, awesome. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. Okay. So what is Ddot's traffic safety investigation? So a traffic safety investigation, or also known as TSI, is formerly known as a traffic safety assessment. It is a request from the public to investigate a specific traffic safety concern that may require our action. A TSI may be used for a variety of safety issues, such as traffic calming and or pedestrian safety, etc. Ddot's Traffic Engineering and Safety Vision team, also known as TESD, will perform the TSI to evaluate the extent of the safety issue and determine if any action is warranted. Okay, so as you can see, here is the process of the formal, the formerly known TSA process. So if you can see in step 2, red, which is red, basically the difference is that Ddot no longer requires the Tsi Questionnaire along with ANC commissioners' written endorsement. So that's basically the only difference from the new TSI process. But I will go in depth from for the other steps moving on. So why does Ddot need a new process? 1, to improve ease of use, accessibility for district residents. 2, to enhance transparency for residents in tracking the TSI requests from start to finish. 3, to streamline operational processes to improve our agency's response. And finally, to accelerate the review of roadway safety requests and make the district's roadways safer across all 8 wards. So the new TSI process overview. Ddot's Traffic Safety Investigation Program will investigate intersections and roadway segments of concern, analyze existing conditions, and provide a plan for safety mitigations if warranted. The TSI program is designed to focus on one traffic safety concern in one location, one block or intersection. A TSI request should not include multiple streets or multiple intersections. So let's just keep that in mind when we do submit TSI. So just make sure that if it's an area that might be, if there are areas that are enclosed, just make sure for that one TSI, you just include that one intersection and then go ahead and submit another TSI if there is another intersection that you are hoping to get investigated. So step 1, residents contact Ddot with a traffic safety concern by going to 311.dc.gov, which I'm sure all of you have been to so far, and then selecting traffic safety investigation. Residents provides information about the extent of the safety issue by completing the online questionnaire via the 311. Information provided should focus on the problem or safety challenge the TSI should address. This will help Ddot identify the most effective solutions to address the specific safety concerns. So in my short time here, I've seen with some, whenever someone asks me to get an update for current TSI requests, I've seen a lot in the description, intersection, blah, 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 needs a crosswalk. So moving forward, we're asking that we don't focus on the type of calming measure that we think is needed. However, the issue that you're seeing. Let's say, for example, Irving and Park Place intersection, they're speeding, people are not stopping at the red light, which in turn is causing accidents. So we just want to be more detailed with the actual issue versus focusing on the type of resolution that we would want. So here is which I'm sure you all are familiar with, here is a little screenshot of what the TSI questionnaire looks like. And I won't go over the examples because that's basically what I just stated, but just to give you a little screenshot of what the current questionnaire looks like. Step 2, Ddot evaluates the safety issue to determine if mitigations are warranted. Step 3, Ddot communicates the findings of the evaluation to the resident. If no safety mitigation is warranted, Ddot will deliver the investigation findings to the resident and close out the request. If a safety mitigation is warranted, Ddot develops recommendations for the most appropriate solutions and closes the request. Please note that a TSI takes up to 130 business days, to complete steps 1 through 3. Once steps 1 through 3 are complete, the request will be closed and the resident will be notified with information on the next steps via 311 notification if applicable. To check on the status of a TSI, please visit the TSI dashboard at tsi.ddot.dc.gov. And I was just notified because I did not know this, because I've received emails that might have said that, okay, Ddot has closed the TSI request. And I've just been notified that there are 2 emails that are sent out. So the first one just says it was closed, but the second, from my understanding, email should give an explanation as to why it was closed. If that's not the case, then please feel free to reach out to me to see why the TSI was closed, and I'll be happy to provide you all with updates. Step 4, if recommendations change existing traffic control and/or on-street parking, a notice of intent, also known as NOI, will be issued. The NOI includes a 30 business day public comment period from the community and ANCs. Ddot considers the comments received at the end of the NOI period in its determination of the mitigations to be implemented. However, feedback may not change the recommendations improvements as they are based on engineering safety assessments. Step 5, which is the final step. Ddot installs the safety mitigations. Installation of safety improvements typically occurs in the next calendar quarter after the TSI is completed. For an example, if a TSI request completed in Q2, January through March, will be implemented in Q3, April and June, if a determination is made to implement a safety mitigation. And also note, some installations will be delayed due to weather as they require warmer temperatures for installation. For example, installation of vertical traffic calming measures such as speed bumps, speed tables, and street markings take place in the warmer months only. Sorry. Okay, so I just wanted to give some feedback, a little FAQ, just in case anyone had any questions that I could cover now. So one, clarify what happens with TSIs already in the queue under the old system. Are changes effective retroactively, or will the new TSIs be the first to undergo the new process? TSIs currently in the queue under the old system will follow this new model. Well, another question, potential question. What's the main difference between TSA and TSI in terms of document requirements? So just as I stated earlier, the new TSI process no longer requires the separate questionnaire or ANC endorsement letter. Residents will only be required to complete a 311 service request, which asks the necessary questions for Ddot's review. This will substantially reduce the number of requests that are closed due to a lack of required documents. Also, ANC resolutions and resident petitions are also no longer required. Another potential question, clarify the role of ANCs in this new process. ANCs will not need to be involved in the start of the TSI intake process. However, Ddot will continue to engage the ANC when the notice of intent process is required for changes in exiting traffic controls and or street parking. For an example, new stop signs, parking signs, signals, etc. In addition, Ddot will notify the ANC via email when the vertical traffic calming measure is warranted. This notification is not required by law. However, Ddot does this as a courtesy to provide an advance notification to the ANC. Why my TSI was closed with recommendations for safety improvements. Why don't I see work underway? As indicated in step 5, installations of safety improvements typically occur in the next calendar quarter after the TSI is completed. For an example, the TSI request completed in quarter 2, January through March, will be implemented in quarter 3, April through June. Also, please note that some improvements require warmer temperatures, as we expressed earlier. For an example, markings, speed hump installations are weather dependent and only take place during warmer weather, as I explained earlier. Another potential question. My TSI was closed without recommendations to make changes. Why didn't Ddot take any action? As indicated in step 3, Ddot will deliver the investigation findings to the resident that include why safety mitigations are not warranted. Reasons can vary, but examples include there is a larger project plan in the immediate area that will impact the TSI area. For an example, would include projects like Florida Avenue, New York Avenue, and intersection project, also known as the Dave Thomas Circle project. Data collection shows the existing conditions do not meet the warrant criteria for certain safety measures, for example, speed tables, ATEs, etc., and or engineering evaluation does not find the need for any changes in the existing conditions. Okay, and this is super short, everyone, but I just wanted to go over the new ANC resolution submission and response. So to assist in the timely response, all ANC resolutions must now be submitted to Ddot through the ANC portal, which is resolutions.anc.dc.gov. And I can, if you guys need me to send over any links, I'll be glad to do so. But once an ANC resolution is submitted through the ANC portal, Ddot will then send an acknowledgement letter within 10 business days with a tracking number and will respond to the resolution within 60 business days. This change is intended to support greater continuity in the ANC resolution submission process and to improve transparency, accountability, and Ddot's accessibility. Resolutions submitted outside of the ANC portal will not be tracked or reviewed. And if you have any additional questions or need any assistance, please contact the Office Advisory Neighborhood Commission at onc@dc.gov. And obviously, you all know that I'm your Ward 1 Community Engagement Specialist. So if you have any additional questions, you can also ask me.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the update. So I think it's great that ANC resolutions are no longer needed or letter of support, since residents can go straight to submitting the requests. And I just heard from a resident the other day who submitted one and let me know. So that's great. I guess I had one question, and then I'll open it up to see if anyone else has any questions for you. And this is sort of unrelated to the new process specifically, but just generally, is there if, for example, there was a previous TSA or TSI at an intersection, and it was, sort of closed out, and maybe there were no changes or there were some changes, but if a resident, requests it again, or if people feel like that intersection is still dangerous, is there sort of a timeline? So for example, if 6 months later someone submits a TSI, will that get considered, or would that get closed out? I just want to be able to tell people.
I believe that it will get considered, especially like, let's say there might have been another accident, or there have been several accidents within a certain intersection. I believe that we can go ahead and submit a new TSI to do a new investigation for that area. However, I will double check, Commissioner Faulkner, and I will let you know, but I believe so.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Felsenthal.
Hey, quick question, just for clarification, to differentiate, I guess, between the terms street and block, which you mentioned earlier. If it say I wanted to submit a TSI for a street that, it covers like two different, like along one street, past like a couple different intersections. It's on the same street, but it's, I guess it would be considered like more than one block. Would that mean multiple TSIs?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Does anyone else have any questions about this?
Yes. Hi, Mignon. It's Jake from 1CO7. So one of the questions was the first question and answer section that you had referred to old TSIs that were already in the works. I didn't quite understand the response to that. Will they be automatically transferred over to the new process?
Correct. So,
okay.
I'm sorry.
No, not at all. Please. So
from my understanding, all of the previous TSIs in the older system have been transferred. Now, I understand that I've gotten a few where it just so happened that they weren't. Now, I've been informed that those that were not transferred over to the new system did not have, let's say, like the questionnaire. So they did not have the supporting documentation, and that's why it was closed out and not transferred over. But anything that did have the questionnaire attached in the required documentation did get transferred over.
So if we're trying to track a TSI, it should still be in the system under the same TSI number. If it isn't, and it's still something that's of concern to us, then we can flag that for you and maybe submit a new one.
Okay.
If like, it turns out that it didn't have the questionnaire or whatever portion of it might have been missing, so it didn't automatically roll over, we can just resubmit and flag it for you.
Okay. And then did you, by any chance, did you have one that you wanted me to look into?
Not that I've noticed right now, but I'll go through and just check all the old TSIs to see whether or not they've migrated over to the new system.
Okay, perfect. And if you are not able to find it, please go ahead and give me a call or email me and I can look for you.
Great. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Commissioner Balaki.
You're on mute.
Yeah, thank you very much. we talked briefly last month before I'd been sworn in, and I just wanted to follow up on what we talked about, and I emailed you afterwards, the DC parking thing, and those of us with driver's license numbers that it won't recognize. I tried again this afternoon and no change.
I have not responded because I have not gotten word back, but I promise that I'm on it. And as soon as I hear back from I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have
And I appreciate the discussion we just had here as a new committee member. This background is very helpful. Thank you.
It's wonderful to meet you. I'm learning everything. So it's a learning process for me too.
Would you be able to actually send us the slides so we can share with the rest of our commission and the public? I think people would find that useful.
Yeah, of course.
Great, thank you so much.
Great.
Thanks so much. I think now we are ready to go on to the next item on our agenda, which is a resolution about in support of streetscape improvements on U Street. This was Commissioner Falaschini's resolution. If you want to introduce it.
Yeah, thank you so much. So this in many ways reflects a resolution that was passed in 2B. Yes, 2B last or the month before last. So in the DC City Council budget that passed at the end of last year and is the operating budget for this year, there was 1.7 million for streetscape improvements along U Street that was allocated for between 14th Street and 18th Street northwest. And still there's no plan, as far as I know, to actually implement those streetscape improvements by Ddot. And so we wanted to emphasize the importance of this to the district and to note some concerns in the process and note some hopes for how it will actually improve the lives of the residents. I did have one comment that I got back from a resident of the SMD today who offered a thoughtful addition, I thought, to the whereas section, that there's a shortage of, that inadequate street lighting contributes to safety concerns. They suggested that we make explicit that refers to both crime and personal security concerns and fall and or injury concerns. I thought that was well taken, because I think that the lack of street lighting does contribute to both of those different types of security concerns. So we may as well say explicitly what we're concerned about. So I would offer that friendly amendment that whereas inadequate street lighting contributes to both crime, personal security concerns, and fall injury concerns. And other than that, I think that the resolution speaks for itself. Would be happy to answer any other questions that folks have about it.
Great, thanks. I think it's great. I think that that edit makes sense to me for clarity, and I think it's great. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Any commissioners with comments or questions? Commissioner Balke.
Oh, thanks. Just briefly want to endorse the amendment that was just proposed, and the commissioner and I discussed this a few days ago. I strongly support this resolution. I've been making my way down this stretch of street for about 40 years, and in particular, I appreciate the shout out to between 17th and 18th, which is particularly bad. I mean, they do have a nice brick sidewalk that was put in a few years ago, but all the other issues that you lay out in your resolution, crowded, trash cans, bad lighting, et cetera. I mean, there are consistent problems, and I hope we can move forward on this. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Also, and truly big shout out to 2B for for drafting what is essentially this resolution and me mostly copying it. But there is also a circulator extension that's being planned from DuPont Circle. The circulator that goes currently from Georgetown to DuPont Circle and ends there is proposed to extend from DuPont Circle up 18th Street, hanging right on Florida, and then traveling along U Street all the way up to the Howard Hospital. So it will pass through our district or very close to our district, but currently, because there is not enough sidewalk space between Florida and 17th on U Street, there is no planned stop for anywhere between T and 18th and 17th and U, which would basically make the circulator extension way less accessible to the residents of Adams Morgan. If we are able to expand those sidewalks along 17th and 18th Street, it could open up the possibility of a stop for that circulator along that portion of that block, and would make the new circulator extension much more accessible for our district, and would open up both a very quick and very cheap route to U Street and a very quick and cheap route all the way down to Georgetown through DuPont Circle. So I think it's really important that we do what we can to try to move in the direction that gives multimodal transportation more options for stoppage in Adams Morgan in order to serve our community.
Great. I think I was not aware of the exact design of that circulator extension. So that's any other commissioners with comments or questions? Do any members of the public have any comments or questions?
I note a question from Stephen Segerland in the chat. Megan, I don't know if you want to address that, if you'd like me to.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could certainly add that. I think it's probably I think it's your resolution, so I'm curious what you think. But I think adding something of that makes sense.
I agree. I consider that a friendly amendment as well. And that's right, Kristen. The current design plans have a stop at just south of T on 18th Street, and then the next stop wouldn't be until past 17th Street, between 17th and 16th on U Street. So while we have this great new infrastructure that's coming in to serve the neighborhood, current sidewalk space along 17th and 18th wouldn't allow for a stop there. So we should request that.
Great. So should we add a resolved, I guess, a resolved clause specifically about that? I think we can also, I guess, I'm trying to think of how we've done it in the past when we've modified resolutions at the committee level. But I think we could just discuss the amendments, and then the exact wording we'll approve at our we'll review at the full commission meeting. So I think just adding a resolved clause that says, be it further resolved, ANC1C urges Ddot to include a stop on the, I guess it'll be the 1700 block of U Street or around there. We can figure out the wording for the new circulator extension.
Take that as a friendly amendment. Thank you.
Great. All right, any additional questions or comments on this?
Kristen asks in the chat, have you heard any updates on when that extended route will happen?
The latest that I saw it or included it as one of the 2 priority projects for the circulator for 2022, but I have not yet seen when in 2022 And I don't know that they have made that clear yet. From what I saw, the mayor pushed for the District 7 extension before the DuPont extension. But I know that this was one of the top 2 priorities from the circulator update last year.
Great. I think Steve added additional note, Ddot produce any required modifications to sidewalks to make the stop feasible. So I think we can add that, Jake, if that is a friendly amendment, and make any sidewalk modifications required to make the stop feasible, if that sounds good to you.
It does. And thank you, Stephen, our transportation guru, as always, for your very helpful commentary and thoughts.
Yes, thank you. All right. Does anyone else have any final comments or questions before we call to a vote? All right, then I move that we recommend the ANC support this resolution in support of streetscape improvements, including wording changes to address safety concerns and to request a circulator stop on the 1700 block of U Street. I believe in, and can I get a second?
Second.
Great. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? Great, unanimous. And we will then consider this at our full ANC meeting on March 2nd, I believe. Great, thanks, Commissioner Falaschini. All right, now we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is a BZA special exception case. I believe Kyrus Freeman, Michael Dyer, and Shane Detman all likely need to be promoted for that, Gordon. All right, welcome. So we are, this is a special exception at 2329 Champlain Street Northwest. And I will let you folks take it away.
It's good seeing you all. Thank you for including us on your agenda tonight. It's been a while since we've last seen each other, so it's good to see you. I'm Kyrus Freeman. I'm a partner at the law firm of Holiday Knight. My colleague Shane Detman, and most importantly, our client, Michael Dyer. I'd also ask, hopefully you see as a participant, John Edwards. If you could promote him to a panelist, that would be great. John is a project architect with Bonsor Hairsign Architects. And to the extent there are any architectural related questions, we would like to have John available to answer those questions. So Shane has a PowerPoint slide presentation that, if he's given the ability to share his screen, I'd ask that he could share his screen so we can go through our slide deck.
He can.
1 second. Is everyone seeing the PowerPoint slides now?
Yes, sir.
All right, let me go to slideshow here and just make sure. Now you see full screen?
Yes.
Great.
So as Commissioner Faulkner announced, we have a pending BZA application 20584 for what's really a reapproval of a project that was initially approved back in 2006 due to passage of time and other issues associated with the site. We are now filing a new application to essentially reapprove that old project. And our BZA hearing date on this is March 23rd, 2022. Next slide, please. So I'm going to try to get through the slides quickly just to make sure I'm allowing enough time for Q&A. So if I'm going too fast, stop me. But I do want to try to cover as much ground as possible, but leave enough time for questions. So here's our site. Our site is obviously on Champlain, somewhat mid-block. I believe the building to our immediate north is the Morgan. Our property is about 10,000 square feet. It's an existing old building that was built in about 1924, small, 26 square feet, 2 stories, approximately 10,000 square feet with a 95% lot occupancy. And historically, it's been used for commercial and industrial uses. Even at, and part of that is what's caused some of the delay, cleaning up some of the prior industrial use issues. It was zoned for industrial use through the 90s. The current zoning is Reed Cook RC, means Reed Cook 1. And we had a project previously approved, same exact envelope, I should say, in terms of height and FAR, that was approved back in 2006. But due to the passage of time, those prior approvals have expired. Next slide, please. You're all likely familiar with the site, but just for orientation, picture 1 shows a view up Champlain Street looking north. Picture 2 shows our building. It's the 2-story stone building. Picture 3 shows a more direct view of our building and the existing building to the north. And picture 4 is just a view further to the north of our site. Next slide, please. These are pictures of our site from the alley, which is to the immediate east of our site. Picture 1 shows the rear of the existing building. That's from the alley looking south. Picture 2 shows another view of the building. And then again, 3 and 4 views north up the alley. Next slide, please. So what is our project? Our project is a multifamily building, 33 dwelling units, 7 of which are affordable. It's important to note when this project was initially approved back in 2006, that was before the inclusionary zoning requirements took effect. Now that we're having to reapply, we are subject to IZ, and we're providing 7 units whereas none were provided in the initial application. This indicates our relief, right? Our proposal is for 50 feet. That requires special exception relief. Our density is 2.66, whereas 2.16 permitted. Again, another area of special exception relief. But what you will see in another slide is the bulk, 75% of this additional FAR is actually going towards affordable housing. We need relief from the lot occupancy requirement. Technically, we need it, but it's important to point out the 60% is permitted. Today, it's at over 90%. So we are reducing it, but we still need relief for rear yard. I'm sorry, for lot occupancy. We comply with the rear yard and side yard requirements. We do need some court relief, which I'll point out when we get to our floor plans. And we meet the parking, loaded, and GAR requirements. Well, parking and GAR, we're not required to provide loaded. Next slide, please. Let me just go back 1 second. So just to point out, obviously the picture to the top is the existing condition. The picture on the bottom right is just a rendering of what our project will look like upon completion. Next slide, please. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the floor plans. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I try to get the main details. We have a 9 parking spaces, 33 units, fairly standard floor plan layout. Shane, if you could flip through the floor plans again, not to give any of these short shrift, but to the extent that there are any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions about the floor plans. But just to say, to the right is Champlain, to the left is the alley, and to the north and to the south and north are the existing apartment buildings. Next slide, please, Shane. These are I showed you the color view of what the project will look like, just so you'd have a better understanding of that. But these are elevations. Again, this is a Champlain Street elevation. You can see our building's about 50 feet. We have a penthouse that far exceeds the setback requirements. The 33 units, it hasn't been decided yet whether they're rental or for sale. Just that's something we would likely decide at the point we get to permit. Next slide, please. These are, again, I'm sorry, these are just different views, different elevations as you walk around the building. This is the north elevation, meaning if you're, I think the Morgan, looking south, this is what you would see. Next slide, please. This is the south elevation, which you wouldn't see because there's a building there. Next slide, please. This is what we call a section, right? This just is a slice through the building that shows what it looks like. So we got a level of below grade parking. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 levels of units, and then we have a penthouse. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So that's our building. Again, our relief, we want to go to 50 feet. We want 2.66 FAR, which again is exactly the same as what the BZA previously approved back in 2006. So now I'll turn it over to Shane Detman, who's going to walk us through how we meet the standard for relief.
Thanks, Kairos, and good evening, everyone. So I'll quickly walk through these slides, which take you through the special exception standard of relief for the areas of relief that we're requesting. And essentially, it's in order to make the case for special exception in this project, we're subject to the general special exception criteria, which are shown on the slide here, as well as kind of a few specific criteria that are applicable to this particular zone. So in terms of the general special exception criteria, that's that we need to demonstrate that the requested relief is in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the zoning regulations, and that it will not substantially adversely affect neighboring properties. You can see the bullets here in terms of harmony with the general purpose and intent of the regulations. The RC zones, the Reed Cook overlay zones, as they used to be called under the 1958 zoning regulations, they're generally intended to permit flexibility for all types of urban residential development, including apartment buildings, which is what's proposed. Specifically, the RC1 zone is intended to provide for new residential development at the moderate and medium densities. And we are, even with the additional 0.5 FAR that we're requesting, we're still well within that moderate to medium density residential range for FAR. And the project promotes efficient use of land, relatively near transit and several amenities for conforming, and it's going to put a conforming use on the property. As you know, the property has a long history of non-conforming industrial type uses, and now we'll bring use of the property more into line with the intended purpose of the RC zones. In terms of impacts to neighboring property, the height and the density of the project is compatible with the height and density of the immediately adjacent properties to the north and the south, as well as sort of the general area. We'll have a slide that looks at kind of the blocks surrounding the site in terms of how our number of stories and our height relates to the number of stories of several buildings in the area. The proposed residential use is compatible with the prevailing neighborhood, and it's not going to substantially impact light and air on the surrounding context. In terms of specific criteria that are applicable in this project, in order to achieve the special exceptions that we're requesting, that comes under subtitle K 716.1. A says the use and building and the features at the size, intensity, and location will substantially advance the stated purposes of the RC1 zone. I've already talked a little bit about that in terms of the stated purposes of the RC zone, but the bullets are listed there. And most notably, that the project will provide not only new housing, approximately 33 new units, but of that, approximately 7 units of that will be inclusionary zoning units. And we'll take a look at a quick calculation in terms of to show Kairos's point about 75% of that additional density that we're requesting is required to be devoted to affordable housing. There's some additional bullets here that talk about vehicular ingress and egress. All of our loading and all of our vehicular access will be taken off the alley, so no impacts along Champlain Street. And we're also meeting the required amount of parking, including providing a car sharing space within the garage. This is just a quick, this was in our pre-hearing statement, which you received when we submitted it a little bit ago. But this sort of takes you through the IZ calculation for what would be required if the site was redeveloped under existing zoning without any kind of relief. And that's the column under matter of right here. And as you can see, if developed under that 2.16 FAR that's permitted, the resulting inclusionary zoning set-aside requirement would be just over 2,800 square feet. If we do that calculation using the 2.66 FAR that we're proposing, that results in an IZ set-aside of 6,733 square feet, or that's approximately 3,900 square feet of more affordable housing that will be provided if we're able to get the special exception relief that we're requesting. Here are just a few other specific criteria that are applicable to the project with respect to noise related to the operation of the building. It's an apartment building. There are several other apartment buildings in the area, so it's not expected that the noise from this building would be anything other than the noise from other properties. We're not providing any kind of outdoor storage of materials or outdoor processing, fabricating of that sort. And then the last one's not applicable. Already touched upon some of this already, because this criteria goes a little bit similar to the general special exception criteria in terms of the size and the intensity of use of the property. But we're happy to provide you with a copy of this presentation as well if you want to take a more detailed look at these bullets. But again, it's new housing. The heights and densities are compatible with the surrounding context. And this is that diagram that I was referring to that's in our pre-hearing statement, showing the heights in terms of numbers of stories of the properties that are on the block surrounding the property. It's you can see immediately to our north and south are buildings that are built to 4 or 5 stories, several other 4 or 5 story buildings immediately surrounding the project. So I think that we are very much compatible with the prevailing development pattern in the immediate area. Kairos, were you going to take it from here, or do you want me to?
I'll take it from here. So one of the things we looked at in terms of the standard of review is how our building relates to kind of the immediately adjacent buildings. And what we did here was we, meaning John, added our massing in so that we could see how our massing compared to the massing of our building to the immediate north. And what you can see here is it's pretty much exactly the same. Our building is 50 feet. Their building was approved at 48 feet 9 inches. So there's not a substantial difference in height between our building and their building. Next slide. So again, this just shows that the height, and you can see the distance, at least from Champlain Street, between our building and the building to the north. Next slide, please. This is what's called a plat. This plat is from the building permit application for the building to our north. And what you can see here is that that building is set back 12 feet from the property line. And then there's this parking garage ramp that's on their property that provides additional light and air, which combined with the setback on our site, actually there's between 12 and 30 feet of separation between our building and the building to the north. Next slide, please, Shane. So this shows it a little better. This red north-south dashed line is essentially our property line. And the area to the right of that is that 12-foot distance that I just described. And then this ramp here is we're not building on that because it's not part of our property. So that will remain open space combined with our setbacks on our site, particularly when you get above. Next slide, please, Shane. All right, so again, this is just intended to show our height, the height of our building. This again is a is a sheet from the building permit application for this building. And you can see the height of that building is roughly equal to the height of our building. That's what this red line is intended to show. So, that in our view, this clearly demonstrates that our height is consistent with the character of the surrounding buildings. And again, we're going back to the height that, well, not even going back. Our height is the same exact height that the BZA approved for this project in 2006, which was before actually this building was built. Next slide, please. So that concludes our direct presentation. Hopefully we try to be thorough, but also respectful of your time. If there are any questions, either I, Shane, John, or Mike are certainly happy to answer those questions. But we're excited about this project, and we hope that the ANC will support us.
Thank you. Thanks for that. That was very helpful and very thorough. So I think I have a few questions, but first I want to let my fellow commissioners, especially Commissioner Falaschini, since this is in your single member district, if folks have any questions to get started from commissioners.
I have fewer questions than comments that I wanted to put on the record that I've received from the neighbors. So I don't know if you want to go through your questions first, and then I can run through some of that and just let folks know kind of the process that I went through with the neighbors.
I think you can start with that. That is, yeah, I think that
Okay, great.
might be helpful for the rest of the discussion.
Thank you. Kairos, Shane, Mike, it's great to see you again. Thank you very much for doing this presentation. I really appreciate it. So I just wanted to go through so I sent out a Google Doc to my single member district, or Google form, described all of the exceptions that were being requested, and then just allowed people to solicit their commentary. And then also asked them to just say whether or not they were happy with me putting that on the record or not. So I received 28 submissions, and of those, only some of them said that I could put the commentary on the record, and so that's what I'm planning to do. From the height limit exception, I just described that the request was 4 floors above the 3-floor limit, that it would allow for more occupant density, and a requirement to provide more defined units as affordable housing. For the built ratio density exception, I described it as reducing the lot occupancy for the first floor, and then a pretty minor increase for the 3rd and 4th floors, and that the variance of 0.5 is what allows for the additional affordable housing. And the effect I described is having more landscaping and open space at the first 2 floors than you all are actually legally required to do, but 3% less on the top 2 floors than you're legally required to do, and that the penthouse will completely conform to code. So that was how I described it. And then these are some of the comments that I got back. So Zoe Beckerman, one of our neighbors on Ontario, said that she's generally not in favor of allowing developers to exceed height and lot restrictions. That she's worried that we'll be stuck with the consequences of having less light and air generally for the neighborhood if it goes higher. My neighbor, Sebi Devin Bolts, wrote in that he looks forward to having a currently vacant warehouse turning into more housing for neighbors, and that the exceptions seem fine by him. Yevgenja said that wondered what actions would be taken to protect the structural integrity of 2301 when this happened, or when the building happens. So that is like a question that I think would be good for us to have answered, is just what will be done to make sure that the neighboring buildings are taken care of during construction and aren't disturbed. My neighbor Laura said that she's not concerned with the increased density, but just hopes that the building sticks with the same height as neighboring buildings, which I will note that it does. It's the exact same height as the two neighboring buildings. My neighbor, our neighbor, Kieran Pasco. Oh, sorry, actually that one is not supposed to be on the record, so I will scratch that. My neighbor Diane Kostrick said that she is concerned with several of the zoning exceptions, among them the height and regulated green areas, that there could be a smaller building, and that the zoning rules should be observed to be fair for everyone living on Champlain. My neighbor Elizabeth Cassidy said that they share the concern that there will be several more units on Champlain Street, and that there's only 9 parking spaces that'll be provided. And I've heard this from a few of the neighbors, actually, concerns about parking along Champlain Street, and what this will do to potentially increase the number of folks who live here with only 9 parking spaces being provided for the building. So that is actually a concern that I've heard from several neighbors. And I apologize, commissioners, for taking the time, but I do think that given all of the feedback that we solicited, that it's important that we put our neighbors' concerns on the record. And then my neighbor, Marina Petrovich, said that she's concerned about the light and air. She's a south-facing unit in the Morgan just there, and she's very concerned that this will take away from her view and her light and her air. Andres Chang, who is a neighbor across the street, said that he has no concerns if the building provides more affordable housing, which we'll note that 75% of the units that would be allowed by the special exception would be affordable housing units. My neighbor Samantha said that she lives on the ground floor on 2337 Champlain, where her only source of light is from that side, and that she's worried that if the exceptions are approved, that would reduce her light and air. And I hear that and appreciate that. Lisa Botter also lives next door and had similar concerns, and also concerns about parking. Margot Lambier also said on the record that they oppose. They live in that building, the Morgan, just north. Don Mulliken also said that he does not support, and he lives in that unit just to the north, and listed a few reasons. He felt that it should be smaller scale, neighborhood parking, traffic and congestion. And then let's see, there are a few that I'll just go through really quickly. Kareem Malik is concerned that the new building is getting built way too close to the Morgan. Marty Millett wrote in, he's the vice president at Jubilee Housing, and said that Jubilee Housing generally supports projects that include or increase the number of affordable housing units in the neighborhood, and so they're supportive. Queenie Chin said that the north elevation expansion might block the sunlight and decrease privacy in the neighborhood. A neighbor named Joanna also, is worried about height and light right next to where they live. Our neighbor Ricardo said that he appreciates that they're keeping the original facade, and more residential non-subsidized property in the neighborhood is better. Shay Boyd that said that this is, our area is more built out than before, and so they're worried about more exceptions. Our neighbor Sharon said that said that she requested to retain the current zoning height and limitations. And those are Caitlin, Ed, Michael, and Chelsea. Or no, sorry, Caitlin and Ed. Caitlin McClure, the neighbor, said that she lives on the 4th floor of 2337 Champlain and is worried. So same, another neighbor from the Morgan. So we've seen, you know, as we've heard, many concerns from the Morgan right next door. Ed wrote in saying, Ed Carley said that the building should be taller and have even more homes. This area should be even denser. Our neighbor Michael Mishke said that he supports the development entirely. We need more in the neighborhood. And then one more comment from a neighbor named Chelsea, who said that they're concerned about the height and density of the unit. So that covers all of the concerns that I've gotten from the neighbors. I have read over this extensively and looked at the project extensively and have many thoughts, but I will limit them to the following. I am highly in favor of affordable housing in Adams Morgan. I think one of the things that is my duty as a commissioner is to represent the interests of our current residents, and also to represent the broader interests of our city. And one of the things that we need desperately is more affordable housing in the city. I would note that much of the market rate housing already in Adams Morgan has driven many of our former residents out of the neighborhood, and that there are many fewer places for them to live. And the option of having 75% of this special exception be going directly to inclusionary zoning that allows for greater access for more of our neighbors to very nice housing in the neighborhood is extremely important to me. Two, I would note that this building was approved in 2006 before the Morgan was built. Anyone who purchased in the Morgan could have had the ability at that time to go and actually see these plans that were on record already approved at that time. And so while I am sensitive to the impact that this will have on the neighboring building, I will note that this building development was approved and the plans were there for anyone to see if they were going to buy a unit in the building next door. And that actually this is a scaled down version of the original project, which would have been much larger than this and was actually already brought down much more to fit the scale and size of the neighboring buildings. I also think that it's incredibly important that this building fits almost exactly the size and density of the neighboring buildings around it. The building at 2301 Champlain, the building across the street, the building just north at the Morgan, they're all at 2.6 density, or roughly 2.6, 2.7 density. That's what all of these buildings along Champlain Street are now. And so it seems odd that we would, folks in the neighboring buildings that were granted the exact same special exceptions for the height and density of their buildings would then come along just afterwards, 10 years later, and say, oh, well, now we're too dense. Now we have too many cars. Now this is too much for our neighborhood. That seems the height of NIMBYism to me. Except here, it's not in my backyard, it's not in my side yard. So I think that, to me at least, I see no reason why a developer that develops later should be treated any differently and be given any less exception than one that develops earlier. I will note, however, that I find this very different from the developments that are happening along Ontario Street right now. Some of those developments do feel very out of scale and scope with the current buildings that are along that street. And that's of worry to me. This building along Champlain Street is very much in line with the neighboring buildings around it. So those are some of my thoughts. I do share concerns on parking. I do. It is a little bit of a worry to me that there are only 9 parking spaces. If even, 2 of those parking spaces could be made into car share, that would, I think, reduce the overall need of the building. I appreciate that there is a car share space that was added in there, because I think that that's kind of the wave of the future is, folks in apartments and condos sharing. I would also highly encourage y'all to be thoughtful about electric charging capacity in your building, because that is also something that we're all going to be converting to very quickly. And you should do it on the front end and not have to think about it afterwards. So make sure that you're working with Pepco to get high capacity charging in there as a possibility. But, I do share the concerns. It is challenging to find parking around the neighborhood. That said, the research is incredibly clear that when less parking is built into a building, fewer people purchase cars and more people use public transit and biking. And we live in a dense city center, and we should be, through our engineering and building codes, pushing people to use more green sources of transportation and public transportation. So while I share those concerns, I also understand the reason for building things this way. And I think that concludes my thoughts. Thank you so much for the time.
Thanks, Commissioner Falaskini. I'll let the folks, Kairos, and I know there were some questions in there that you might want to answer.
Sure. I try to take as many notes as I could, so if I miss anything, I apologize. But let me start with the yes. We can look at, as it relates to parking, we are meeting the parking that is required under the zoning regulations. We're not asking for any parking relief. That being said, yes, we can absolutely look at making an additional space a car share space. Yes, we can absolutely add the equipment to have an electric car charger. As an aside, I've been looking at an electric car. I got to figure out how to charge it. It's going to cost me a lot of money to figure out how to get a charger in my garage. So those are easy yeses. I think just a couple of points. I think I have a list of comments here. One, again, the height of our building is the same exact height as it has been approved since 2006. So there is no change there. That has been well known in the public record. Interestingly, and there are a lot of comments about loss of light, air, views, etc. I think you mentioned some of them were in the Morgan. I don't know that all of those folks were in the Morgan. What I think is very interesting is that the Morgan is there because they got BZA relief to go up to 49.9 feet of height. So they got BZA relief from the FAR requirements. So the reason they are designed in that way is exactly because they got the same exact relief we're asking for. What I also find interesting is that when that building was going through this zoning process, the opposition, the comments in opposition, I guess to the north of that is the Erie, were loss of light, loss of air, loss of ventilation, loss of views. What did the BZA say to those comments? I will quote, I'm reading from the BZA order approving the Morgan, rejecting the opposition comments for that project. The BZA order said, give me a second. The height of the subject building, i.e. the Morgan, at about 50 feet, will be compatible with the surrounding area, being appropriate to the Erie building immediately adjacent on the north, and the approved brass knob, i.e. our site, development immediately adjacent to the south, as well as the overall area. So the board found that that height was okay, based in part on our height, and they found that they were consistent. Secondly, the board said that, again, an almost 50-foot high building fits the context of the street and completes the urban residential development along the east side of Champlain Street. Again, that's what the board said in rejecting the same comments that we're hearing now about the building that those commenters live in. And last but not least, there's a long body of law, Board of Zoning Adjustment, Zoning Commission, Court of Appeals, that clearly indicates that an adjacent property owner has no right to light, air, views, or ventilation across another property's party. I can cite 10 cases for you that support that proposition, but instead of doing that, I'll just read from the order from the Morgan. Quote, while the association claims that there will be an adverse impact on the views from the roof deck, it is well settled in the District of Columbia that a property owner is not entitled to a view across another person's property without an express easement. So I get it. They're used to looking over a 23-foot building, but that does not create a right of light, air, views, ventilation across the client's site. Going through again some of the specific comments, and I think we had a slide that showed the substantial distance between the buildings. At one point, it's 12 feet, but as you move east, it gets to at least 25, 30 feet. So there's a substantial separation between those buildings. Just to pick up on some of the comments, there was a comment about we're getting relief from the green area requirements. That is not the case. We are compliant with the GAR requirement. Just wanted to make that clear. All of this stuff I think I heard was light, air, ventilation, parking. We just talked about parking. And I do want to make one more point. That other point is that, Shane, if you could share the screen and go back to the IZ slide. Because this, what's different, when this project was initially approved, we were not subject to inclusionary zoning, right? It would have been 100% market rate project. We haven't changed anything. The only thing that has changed is time and the regulations. And as a result of that change in time and regulations, we are providing 6,733 square feet of affordable housing. How much density are we gaining? We're only gaining 5219 as a result of this relief. So just in terms of math, we are providing more square footage. It works out to be approximately 23% of the total. We are providing more square footage as affordable housing than we are gaining in terms of density. So that's an important factor. We looked at what some of the other buildings are providing, and we are providing more than those other buildings, number one. And number two, my screen is covering the right side. Not only are we providing more, we're actually providing larger units, right? A lot of IZ units are 300, 400, 500 square feet. You will see our IZ units, 2-bedroom, 953, 1-bedroom, 751, 609, 774, 926, 699, 853. So we're not providing, what you may see in other projects. We're actually providing reasonably sized IZ units that are proportionate to the size of our market rate units. So
I really appreciate that, Kairos. And I remember that was one of the things that Mike and I spoke about when I first toured the property, was just how important it is in a neighborhood like Adams Morgan that we get inclusionary zoning, or that we get more affordable units that can house families. We've got a lot of families in our neighborhood that desperately need housing. So y'all providing that size housing for folks in our neighborhood is really important, and I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Last 2 points, there was a comment about what we'll do to make sure we're not adversely impacting the buildings either to our north or south. Under the building code, we'll have to inspect, we'll have to monitor to make sure we're not damaging those buildings. I think Mike's had a tour of at least one of the buildings to our south. In terms of what's happening with respect to I think there's a question in the chat, what's happening with respect to the environmental remediation at the site. That is ongoing. We are continuing to work through that process. Mike can answer any questions on that. I think what you'll see, they continue to maintain the site. They recently painted some of the facade in order to keep it in good condition. But the remediation is an ongoing process. And I should add, part of the reason why we're having to reapply is because of this continual effort of remediation to get the site in a condition to move forward with the actual development of the site. And as a result of that, we've lost time, we've had to reapply and are now back in front of the ANC, the community, and the BZA to hopefully get our project reapproved. So I think I covered everything. If not, please let me know. I'm happy to answer any other questions that you all have.
Thank you. So there was one question raised in the chat, and that I know we've gotten some questions about, which is about the property taxes on the property, which I know is my understanding is there is an ongoing appeal. So I don't know if you want to sort of speak to that.
There is, and I can speak to that. Kairos just mentioned the fact that this has been a long process, and the reason that we're back in front is because of the remediation. But it's a little bit more complicated than that, because the site of the Morgan was a BP Amoco station, and they had 16 underground storage tanks, a few of which leaked and impacted our building and also impacted buildings to our south in the alley. And cleaning up was easy for the Morgan because there's no building sitting on top of that once the Amoco station was gone, so they could excavate everything. Well, we have been kind of stuck in the middle between a fight between BP, who's the responsible party for the cleanup of the site, and DDOE, who is the government agency that is in essence saying how the level the site needs to be cleaned to. And so for really since the former developer had it, but I've been involved since about 2013. From 2013, 2014 on, we've been in a fight. We've been in the middle of a fight between BP and DDOE. So during that time, we got hit with vacant building taxes. We got hit with blighted taxes, and we would go down, we would clean up the site. We would explain the situation that we can't move forward because there's no agreement between BP and DDOE. It's important that as we're having this fight, which we're having, we've made certain filings for a hardship exemption. DDOE actually recently, DCRA recently in the last couple of weeks has been very receptive, and we're having a good exchange of information right now about our case. We're paying the standard tax rate, and we have over the last 4 years. So the taxes are normally $26,000 for this building per year. We've been paying $30,000 a year for the last 3 or 4 years to make sure that while we're having this fight, that we're not depriving the city of the funds it needs to provide services to the neighborhood. So we expect this fight to be at its conclusion by the time we go in front of the BZA. I'm hopeful that we're going to continue the good exchange of information that we've had over the last couple of weeks, and that we can bring this to a successful conclusion. But we've just been, as landowners, as the developer, stuck in between BP and DDOE. A lot of the timeline has been out of our hands. But as of right now, we have a good settlement agreement with BP, which has allowed us to do all the work that you've seen over the last year. And we're just continuing with that work.
Great, thank you. And I guess one thing that my understanding would also be that in order to receive a building permit, regardless of the BZA case, but in order to ever receive a building permit, you will have to have the
Exactly.
taxes, resolved.
And I'll tell you, if you would have asked me 6 months ago, I would be less optimistic that we would come to a good solution to that. But I'm actually very optimistic right now that we're going to come to a good solution way prior to a building permit being issued.
Great. Commissioner Clem.
Thanks, Commissioner Faulkner. Hi, everyone. I just had a couple of questions. So I don't know necessarily how to look at the renderings, but it looked like from the rendering that the facade was kept and that there was a setback to the building. Is that correct?
Yes. If you like, we can pull it up and walk through it if you want us to. But the short answer to your question is yes.
Okay. I was just curious because was there a requirement to keep the facade, or you just decided to keep the facade?
So there was not a requirement per se, but back in 2006, some of the folks really loved that facade and thought it was important to try to keep it in as part of the development. So we've tried to abide by that commitment that we made in 2006. And just in case any of you were here back in 2006 and said, hey, we thought you were keeping that facade. So that is something that we agreed to as part of our first round of project.
Okay. Yeah, no, there's a slide earlier in the presentation that shows, I think, a little bit. Yeah. I only say that.
Third floor plan,
yeah.
If you go back to the third floor plan.
Yes, that's rendering looks good. So in other words, so from the street level or from looking at here, it looks like there's going to be 3 stories up front, and then the rest of the building will be a little bit set back.
Correct. Shane, if you can go to the third floor plan.
This is totally random.
The setback is this terrace area. So this is the setback. So that roof is the roof of the existing building, and this is the setback.
I see. A little random, but somebody lopped off the F of the building. So if you look at the rendering if you look at the color picture, like there's the F, the thing just, anyway, so the facade is not the way it is rendered in that.
Yeah, and we had the parapets were crumbling up there just due to age, and we couldn't secure them. We were nervous as we were working behind the building that they could actually fall forward. So we maintained all the rock on site so that we can hopefully build back those parapets. But we had to take them down just for safety issues right now.
Okay, thank you. I'm curious. Out front, so the front of the building will be there won't be any ingress or egress for the parking in the front. So the front, are you planning on asking for some sort of change in the parking area out front, or will it just be a pedestrian entrance and the parking on Champlain can remain the same, which is just zoned parking?
Sure.
Right.
So our garage entrance is at the rear. It's off the alley. So we're not doing any changes there. So I don't know what the existing, I guess there's a loading entrance there that may be no parking. That could go away and become a parking space. We have to look at the curbside plan, but we're not taking away spaces on Champlain. And likely, yes, looking at the question, typically once you do a new development, Ddot will likely require you to improve the public space adjacent to your site. So I expect we will have to restore that curb cut that's there. Restore meaning close, that curb cut's there and make that a normal sidewalk with curb and other Ddot standards. We might have to put some trees there. I'm not quite sure, just given the width of the sidewalk. But we're not taking away anything that you would want there. We're taking away the curb cut, but other than that, we're not taking away things you want.
Yes, thank you. I don't know if this is a requirement, I mean, at this stage, but do you know at what level you're planning to offer your IZ units, or how would you get to, how does that work?
So the AMI is a function of whether it's rental or for sale. So if they are, it's either going to be 60% or 80%, depending on the ultimate form of ownership at the point of delivery of the project. But we have not yet decided that yet. So it's 80% if they're condos, 60% if they're rental.
Okay. All right, great. And then the last thing I wanted to ask is the 12 feet that you said, the alleyway in between you and the Morgan, is that essentially public? You said that that is part of your lot. Is that, would that be public use, or would that be gated off? And
Yeah,
only...
if I wasn't clear on that. So let me clarify. So here's the alley, here's Champlain, here's the Morgan. What I was trying to articulate is their building is set back 12 feet from their property line. So that's not public space, that's not shared space. That is property that is owned by the Morgan or whoever owns that, whatever form of ownership that is. So this, everything kind of above this red line is on the Morgan's property. So it's not public space, it's not shared space, it's their space. But it presumably the building's not moving at any time. So what I was saying is that they're at 12 feet there. Our building, if you follow the red line, Shay, maybe do a cursor to show where our footprint is, starting at Champlain Street. So our building at Champlain is there at the property line. So it's 12 feet there. But then when you get further back, we have this garage ramp and we're set back above 12, 13 feet. So we're set back, once you get to the east, we're set back about 25, 30 feet at that portion of the site. So they have space on their site, we have open space on our site, which added together equals the dimensions that I indicated. Maybe the third floor plan, Shane?
I appreciate that. Thank you. That answers my questions, and thank you.
Okay.
Any other commissioners have questions? All right, members of the public, if you have any questions or comments. I think a hand was just up and then it went down. Oh, okay, there we go. Chris, go ahead.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great, thank you, commissioners. So this is in the Reed Cook 1 zone, right? And so I had just questions around that because I keep hearing that this is, the same as the 2 buildings next to it. Just to be clear, did the Morgan take up 95 or 96% lot occupancy? Because it doesn't look that way.
Sure. So it is RC1, Reed Cook 1, which is a new zone as a result of ZR. I think we had an image that showed the zoning map. I don't know what the Morgan's lot occupancy is. I think what's different here is that our existing lot occupancy is 95.8%. So we're not changing the lot occupancy at the ground floor. This is technically an addition to an existing building. So that existing lot occupancy at the ground floor is an existing condition. It's 95.8%. And as the building goes up, it reduces. So that's a fair question. We're not increasing or expanding or making it 90-some% at the ground floor. That is an existing condition.
And I would say, Kairos, also, we're actually reducing slightly the ground floor lot occupancy as well. So it's going to be, even at the ground floor, it's going to be smaller than it is right now. And then it gets smaller as it moves up, as you said.
And
Yeah, and
just so I,
confirmed, I think the lot occupancy for the Morgan is at 60%. It doesn't look like
That's
they got
okay.
any lot occupancy relief, but again, they were starting from a vacant site, not with an existing building.
And so, but you're just keeping the facade, right? You're demolishing the rest of the building, or no?
No, we're keeping portions of the walls. We're not just demolishing we're not just keeping the facade. We're keeping portion of the exterior walls.
Okay, but you don't have to. You don't have to keep the rear. I mean, that's kind of by choice. Your lot occupancy is by choice. You don't have. I mean, this is an old industrial building. You don't have to keep the rear of it to meet the occupancy conformity.
So we do have to keep a portion of it. So when you say
For
we
what
don't
reason?
have to, because it's an existing non-conforming use, number one. Number two, and again, I don't want to go all the way back to 2006, but part of the discussions was at that point, people really loved that building. So it was a desire for us to keep as much of it as possible.
Okay, just a couple more questions. I really appreciate this. There was talk about there's no 3-bedroom units in this proposal, is there?
I think the answer to that is no, John.
Okay, because I just heard a comment about families. I just don't see how that's possible to be done in this building. But
I think the comment on that was that if you look at a lot of other buildings, they're 400, 500, 600 square feet, whereas and I think the comment was specifically as related to the IZ units, so we have a 2-bedroom, which is 929 net, by the way, not gross. So net is actually what it is. 727, 929. So they are larger units than what you would typically see for 2 or 1-bedroom unit in other sizes.
all right, I know I want to be mindful of people's time. I just
sure, let me just finish this thought. As an example, the I've seen IZ units that are 452 square feet, 574 square feet.
I'm just talking about families, and the comp plan defines a family size unit at 3 bedrooms. But the question about on the IZ, the last point I have on the IZ, we noticed that it's the units are relegated to the first and second floors and not the upper floors, like up in the penthouse. But you were saying how all the extra density in the upper floors, 75% of this extra density in the upper floors are would be counted towards affordable housing, yet there's no units up there. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so actually what we said was that the density gained as a result of this relief is, and we have a chart if you want to pull that slide up, Shane. I didn't say that all of the IZ is in the additional area. What I said is that the proposed, if you could pull up the IZ chart, that'd be helpful. But I think this is a good question. What we were saying, if we build a matter of right project, it'd be 2,818 square feet. Our proposed IZ is 6,733, which is 3,914 more than what would be built delivered as a matter of right. If you look at the actual density gained through the project, we're gaining 5,219 square feet of density. So what the comparison, the point I made was the amount of density gained, 5,219 square feet, is more than the amount of IZ proposed, 6,733.
Okay, I just want to do a couple more contrasts here because we do have concerns about this. To the north, I mean, you're comparing a property to the north that is actually going uphill, right? So when you say we're about the same height, it's actually, there's an incline, right, on Champlain, and it goes up pretty significantly there. So I think that's important to note. And also just to the south.
I think that is a fair point to note, but what that actually means is that building is actually taller and higher than our building, because you correctly pointed out, it's going on an incline north. So that means it's actually taller than our building.
But you showed it actually almost at the same height, which means that their relief was actually far less.
No,
Because
their
it goes-
relief was, I'm looking at their order. Their relief was to go to 48 feet, 9 inches.
It's the same relief requested. It would sit lower by about
Measured
15
from the building point, of measurement.
So the center of this building would sit I can't remember what we said, but I remember looking at it and going over this with Mike, and that it would sit about 7 feet lower than the center of the Morgan.
Right, it's important. The building height is measured from the curb opposite the middle of the front of the building. So there's measured height and there's actual height. So our building may be 50 feet and their building may be 50 feet, but it's 50 feet on an incline higher than our incline.
All right.
Excuse me. And I'm sorry, I didn't get to finish. I'm sorry. I just, there's, if you look at the rest of the buildings, well, first of all, the one to the south got a PUD, which gives far greater density bonuses and things like that. So comparing your height, which is seeking just special exceptions and just a kind of a pittance of affordable housing and no family housing, to the south there is a PUD, and it's of the same height as a PUD, which grants usually far greater density, and you're basically getting that density without doing a PUD. I also want to point out the other buildings in the strip there, their lot occupancies don't go all the way back to the alley, which is what you're trying to do by claiming this is an addition to the building. So you're going to have some opposition. I think, some of that opposition could go far away if you build in more affordable housing, you build it like truly for families, for like family sized. That's all. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
If I could clarify, the building to our north, the Morgan, was not a PUD, and they got 49 point. I don't want to round up their height. 48 feet 9 inches was approved through the BZA as a special exception. So that was not a PUD. I'll confirm whether the building to the south was a PUD. Keep in mind, that's a much larger building. So we can look at that. The point about lot occupancy, as I stated, we have an existing structure on our site. Just to be clear, when we were going through this process in 2006, it was essentially said, keep the building or we'll file a landmark application to make you keep the building. So I don't, that's why we're keeping as much of the building as possible. So that is, we can document that and demonstrate that, which is a very different situation than other buildings that were being developed as a matter of right without an existing building, which some said could be landmarked. We're happy to look at the distribution of the IZ units. That's not a problem. I mean, that's no problem for us.
Thanks. Commissioner Falskini?
Hey, thank you. I think Chris does raise two good points there, and I had spoken with Mike about trying to add at least one family size unit. I also, I'm raising a family on this block, and we live in a 2-bedroom apartment. So I do take some umption to the notion that you can't raise a family in a 2-bedroom unit, because I am. But I do also, I do also agree with the notion that we should be providing larger units to our families in the neighborhood. And so Mike and I did speak early on about adding a 3-bedroom unit to this, and I would certainly appreciate seeing that. Still, these units as distributed are not set in stone, as we also spoke about, and this is something that can be adjusted over time. And so I didn't specifically raise it in this meeting because it's been an ongoing discussion that we've had, and I found these folks to be very reasonable and open to ideas. And so I hope that this was something that we could, push on a little bit later on. But I agree with Chris on that. And I also would note that the IZ requirements that the city provides were also recently updated to make sure that there was a distribution that didn't all land down in the basement. So I would just hope that you guys do look at that as you're developing these and distribute them through the building as equitably as possible.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to respond to one more point. Yes, we will look at the addition of 3 bedrooms. We'll look at where they're distributed. We'll look at where they're distributed within the building. There was a comment that the building to our south was a PUD. That is not correct. We just checked the zoning map and did not see any PUD approval for the building to the south. Again, that was a quick check, but
the PUD is the one across the street. The PUD is the 2302 or 2306, whatever the one directly across, the big one directly across the street with the colonial parking in it.
Fair enough.
That's the PUD.
Fair enough.
But 2301 Champlain is not a PUD. It's also was granted exception for density and height, similar to the Morgan. It's also a 2.7 FAR, 50 feet height. It's not a PUD.
Yeah, I think, and I think the height and density of our project is completely consistent with the height and density of 99% of the other multifamily buildings on this portion of Champlain Street.
Great, thanks. So I just, in the interest of, we have been, had a very thorough discussion. Thanks, Commissioner Falaschini, for pulling together all of those comments and feedback from your constituents and neighbors. I think some of the questions I had have already been addressed, and I just wanted to add that I do agree that I think the increased number of IZ is great. I think 3 bedrooms units would be great, but also 2 bedrooms, as Commissioner Falaschini pointed out, are also families live in units like that size. Just wanted to add as well that I think this building is in line with a lot of the neighborhood, or a lot of the neighborhood and the immediate neighbors. And I do think that, as Commissioner Falaschini pointed out very well, that folks are living in buildings that got exceptions that they now don't want additional buildings to get. We have an opportunity to welcome some more neighbors, and so I think that's a great opportunity. So I'm going to suggest we move to a vote. Commissioner Falaschini.
I'm sorry, before we do that, I also just wanted to note on the record that I am supportive of this and I intend to vote that way. But I do, that is contingent upon these taxes being paid. And also bid taxes being paid. We support and need our bid to continue to make this neighborhood the lively and commercial, happy commercial district that it is. And so we need those to be paid as well.
Thanks. Yeah, and I will add that I think we can vote on whether to recommend the full ANC approve the exception. I think we should probably keep it a clean vote on that, but that we can certainly at the March meeting at the full ANC discuss including a stipulation about the taxes in any approval. So just to be clear on that, I think that seems like what a lot of that I think that makes sense. And I think, but for this vote, I think we should have a straight up or down vote. And then at the full ANC, we can discuss the tax issue. Great. All right, then I move for a vote in support of this BZA application and special exceptions. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Any abstentions? Great. All right. Unanimous vote in support of the full ANC, recommending support in support of a recommendation to the full ANC in support of this, and we will then take this up at our March 2nd meeting.
Thank you all for your support. I do just have one quick question. Will we need to present at the March 2nd hearing, or is this normally just an agenda item?
Yeah, so we can discuss. I think usually we like to have a short presentation. I think specifically, I think just outlining the special exceptions that you're asking for. I think the IZ information, especially if anything changes, and probably some brief sort of some of the photos and renderings. But usually we ask for a sort of a shorter, condensed presentation.
So you don't want a 2-hour presentation?
I don't intend to go through all those comments again either. I think we got those on the record.
Yeah, we try to do the full airing here, and then at the commission meeting, we'll be obviously leave time for discussion, but we want to, yes, we do try to keep it a little briefer.
Understood.
Great.
Well, thank you, commissioners and community members. Thank you for your questions and comments, and we look forward to seeing you on March 2nd.
Great. Thank you so much. And this meeting is over.
All right.